My buddy Tex, who I featured on this channel a few times, was hit 5 times by a Russian LMG during an ambush this past weekend. My last video was all about should you join the International Legion and basically why you shouldn't, how dangerous it is. This is a fantastic example, so I'm gonna make this video, should you join the International Legion Part 2. Quick update on Tex, he is alive. He is in the Ukrainian hospital right now. I believe they're gonna ship him to a US military base in Germany for some surgeries. Tex and his team were tasked with assaulting a Russian-occupied village. On their way to the village, they were ambushed by a Russian LMG nest. Tex told me the Russians let about 3 people in his squad pass before they started firing. The 4th person in line was Tex. Tex went down, was able to crawl away and actually pull out a grenade and lob it into the machine gun nest. They stopped shooting. His team laid down cover fire. They were able to CAS-evac him. They had to scrap the mission, but they got Tex out, no other casualties. All things considered, that is a success in my opinion. This is not the first time he's been wounded out there. I'm gonna try to convince him to come home for good this time, but we'll see. He's a stubborn bastard. The last video I posted, should you join the International Legion Part 1, got a ton of love, so I can't thank you guys enough. A ton of comments, people asking questions, and just really cool stuff. So thank you guys so much. Now I wanna share a little bit more in depth, and I want to explain what to expect if you do join once you get out there. One thing that's extremely important to know, realize, and understand if you do go is this is not the United States military. The International Legion is not the United States military. If you get pinned down, if you're under enemy fire, if you have enemy armor coming at you, you can't make a call and get close air support, or you don't have a CAS-evac team that can come get you and your buddies if someone gets hurt. You don't have any of that. It's you, the guys that are out there, and that's it. That aspect of this conflict is extremely unique, and it's actually the reason why I saw a lot of United States veterans who were in the Legion. They ended up going home pretty quickly once they saw what the conflict was, or what the combat was like on the front line, because they realized this is not as organized, this is not as structured as the United States military. You don't have those reinforcements and that air support. You don't have the helo to come get you if you get hurt. None of it. So I saw a lot of US vets that were like, nah, I didn't sign up for this. No thanks. Which I respect the hell out of. If they got there, they had the balls to go, and then they realized, hey, I don't like this, and they left. So that's so much better than getting out there, realizing I don't like this, and then staying and then getting hurt or getting your team hurt. One of the #1 questions I get asked is, what is the conflict like? What is the combat like? And the best way I can describe it would be World War I trench warfare and the guerrilla warfare aspect of Vietnam, somewhere in between. Now, of course, I was not in World War I or Vietnam, but through what I've learned about those conflicts, I would compare it somewhere in the middle. Again, when I was in Ukraine, I was there over the winter time, and the trenches were just awful. They were muddy and sticky and cold and icy and dark. You have to use light discipline, obviously, right? You can't have any lights on because the Russians are meters away. So no lights at night, which means no fire. So while you're in the actual trench, you can use these little trench candles, and that was your heat source, really, if you even brought any, which typically you would. Definitely was reminiscent of stuff that I read in history books about World War I. And I compare it to the guerrilla tactics of Vietnam because booby traps, landmines, camouflage, foxholes, these things are so prevalent out there. We actually, during Legion training, we had a full week or almost 2 weeks where we had classroom studies about booby traps and mines and what to expect on the front line. Just dirty, dirty tactics. I mean, a lot of these mines and booby traps were strictly built just to maim or wound the person so that the rest of their unit would come to help, and then they could be ambushed. I mean, dirty tactics. Now, aside from these, what I would consider to be typical dangers of war, there was some very unique things that you needed to be concerned about. There were multiple incidences of Legionnaires who would download a dating app when they got to Ukraine for when they were on leave, and they would match with somebody and meet up with that person, but it was actually, they were Russians or Russian sympathizers that would meet up with the Legionnaire and hurt them, kill them, or kidnap them. So we were told very early on that we were not allowed to use dating apps after a handful of those incidences. We also had issues where somehow Russians would get Legionnaire intelligence, names, phone numbers, addresses, and these Russians would call back to home, back to our families, and say that we had died in combat. We had multiple Legionnaires just on my unit whose parents received phone calls saying that they had died. And I mean, it was awful. Imagine the parents, you know. The enemy was really looking for any way to get in your head, any way to hurt you mentally, emotionally, physically. Something that was unique to Legionnaires in the International Legion was the fact that many of them would receive bounties on their head. So there would be Signal or WhatsApp group chats where they would get a Legionnaire's information, they would post it, and there would be a monetary reward for killing this Legionnaire. And some of our commanders had hundreds of thousands of euro worth of bounties on their heads. These are things that you'll never hear about regarding the International Legion. And I don't even know if it's stuff I'm necessarily supposed to be talking about, but I think it's extremely important if you are considering making the decision to go. These are things you absolutely need to consider. Now, on a less serious but almost equally as important of a topic is food out there. I saw so many people that came, they wanted to volunteer, they wanted to fight, but because they were such picky eaters, they weren't eating the food that we were given by the people that were donating food to us, the people making food. A lot of the locals, especially during training, the locals would bring food for us to eat. A lot of these Legionnaires would refuse to eat it, so they would get weak, they would get sick, and they'd end up going home because they wouldn't eat. I know that it seems silly, right? But this is also something that's extremely important. If you're a mac and cheese pizza person, that's what you grew up eating, that's what you know, I guarantee you're not going to be eating some of this cold fish and, you know, fatty pork and stuff that you're going to be getting when you're in training. Even the Ukrainian MREs that you're issued are extremely different from anything in the US. I'll see if I can find a picture of one here, but it's a lot of buckwheat, which, you know, you just get sick of buckwheat after a while because in every Ukrainian meal is buckwheat. There's a lot of canned meats, which weren't terrible. But what's kind of cool about being in the Legion is we were donated a lot of different MREs from different countries. So we all had our preferences, right? We all liked the German MREs, for example, because they had like this pasta meatball that was killer. Some of the German MREs had like this stew goulash type thing that was super good. Germans are doing the MREs right. Now, something I wanted to mention in all seriousness here, these last two videos have been all the cons, all the negative things that I can think of about the Legion, the dangers, right? But there are absolutely some positives, and it 100% changed my life for the better. Now, I can say that because I was lucky enough to not get injured or obviously die out there. And in reality, it's a numbers game. Like I've explained in multiple other of my videos on the channel, it's a numbers game. The longer you're out there, the more of a chance you have to get hurt. That it's all indirect fire, or it's a lot of indirect fire. You hear the mortars, you hear their artillery. That one could have your name on it, or it won't. You know, it's a numbers game. So because of my experience, and I was lucky enough not to get hurt, it was life-changing. And I met some of the most amazing people that I've ever known, and they'll be family and brothers and sisters to me for the rest of my life. There were challenges that I had to overcome while I was out there that made me a better person. You get a sense of gratitude for your own country and gratitude for freedom. Seeing these Ukrainian civilians, all of them leaving their entire lives behind to go live in a subway system somewhere so they don't get hit by the bombs coming in from Russia, you know. And luckily I was able to go home to my apartment in Fort Worth with Wi-Fi and my TV, and you know, you get this sense of gratitude. There were certain experiences that I had out there that I would never be able to have in literally any other circumstance in the world. There were some very specific experiences that I had that were able to open up my eyes to see things differently and have a bigger perspective on the world. A lot of the positives that I just mentioned, the positives for me were conceptual. They were mental breakthroughs. I saw people who were in the same boat as me, same situation. They were there for the same amount of time as me. They didn't get shit out of it because they didn't want to. They weren't open to that, which is okay. You know, maybe they weren't supposed to learn certain things there, but if you do go, I encourage you to be open to experiencing all these new things and taking them as learning experiences. Take something good away from it, not just the PTSD, you know. With that said, I'm going to leave it at this one. This one's a little bit longer. Again, I appreciate all the love that we've been getting on the videos, you guys. Like, subscribe, share, turn on the bell notification, all that shit, and I'll have another video up tomorrow. Love you guys.